Hello, Declan. Thank you so much for joining us at the Sports Law and Policy Symposium 2020. We're so delighted to have you and thank you for your time.
Namaskar. Thank you so much for inviting me. India is a place very dear in my heart. I've lived there for some time. I worked, as you know, in Bollywood as a very small part actor with Sham Benegal and Naziruddin Shah and people like that. So it's a real honor to be back.
Fantastic. Declan, from those early beginnings in India, studying organized crime, what brought you in some sense to the study of match fixing in sport?
Well, I was in Moscow working on a television documentary for American and Canadian TV about the links between the Russian mafia and what we call the National Hockey League, which is a big ice hockey league, a big professional ice hockey league in Canada and the United States. And there were clear connections between Russian mafia godfathers and some of the prominent players. They were both social contacts, but also business contacts. So we are interviewing the guy that the FBI and the US Congress has identified, quote, as the head of the Russian mafia. And he told us that he had been in the VVIP section, the very, very important people section of FIFA at a World Cup final, but not just in a VVIP with Hillary Clinton and Al Gore and Pelé and people, but right in the front row, two people along from the president of FIFA. And you really can't get much more symbolically powerful place. You know, it's like being, for the Catholics who are joining us today, it's like being in the Holy Father's balcony on Easter Sunday. You know, it's a really, really powerful moment. So I was sitting there in Moscow with two thoughts in my mind. One is, gosh, I really hope I survive this trip to Russia. And two, if I do, I really want to understand what people like this man are doing at the epicenter of sport. So that's what I did. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to do my PhD at Oxford with a really elite team of anti-organized crime researchers. And so I've written a number of best-selling books on the subject.
Fantastic. And did that come from a love of sport or just a feeling that this is not something that's right and someone has to start fixing it in many ways?
Look, like everybody who's watching, I love sport. Sport has given me many of the best friendships, many of the best moments in my life. I'm a passionate football player. I'm a passionate boxer and martial arts guy. I love skiing, all those kind of things that many of the people who are watching it. And to see it corrupted and to see it brought down is extraordinarily dangerous. Let me begin the substantive part of our conversation this morning, because I know that my Indian friends and colleagues don't have much time. Match fixing is an existential threat to modern day sport. It's an existential threat for two reasons. One is that it's not like cheating. It's not like taking dope. It's not like all the other ones where the athletes, the coaches, the infrastructure in the sports are trying to win. They're using illegal methods to win. This is where the players are cheating to lose. They're transforming the sport into a piece of theater. And that's death. This is why people turn on their television, their computer, their mobile phone, go to the games live, whatever they do to bring money into our industry, because it's that uncertainty, that glorious uncertainty of sport. And that gets destroyed by match fixing in a way that we've never seen before. There's a graveyard of destroyed and killed off sports around the world because of this. The other thing that is happening that we've never seen before is that we're now seeing the rise of a demographic threat to traditional sports, and that is esports. So you have two scenarios in this nightmare. One is that traditional sports, be it cricket, be it field hockey, be it football, be it rugby, whatever, are facing a wave of match-fixing corruption. At the same time, people under the age of 25 are fascinated with esports, and the traditional sports are now regarded as daddy's sports. So you have this threat, this two-punch threat that's going on, and it's a real existential problem. It's a real existential threat to our sports that we love.
And Declan, we hear about fixing every now and then. It seems to be around. How significant is this problem, and how much does the layman know of what is actually underlying sports corruption?
there's something new that's going on in sports that we've never seen before. Please, I beg you, my Indian friends and colleagues, don't think that I'm here to say there's this brand new thing called match fixing. Match fixing has been around since the ancient Olympics, when the, Akbar the Great and the boys were, playing polo. They were probably fixing something about it or cheating in some way. So we've always had cheating and match fixing in sport. We've always had doping, for goodness sake, in sport. But we've got something new that we've never seen before. And it's only started to come in the last 15, 20 years. And that is the globalization of the sports gambling market. So as we all know, globalization has transformed our lives. I mean, we're doing this interview in a globalized fashion, thousands of miles away, different time zones. We're still able to do it. It's transformed all kinds of industries, but it's also transformed the sports gambling world. Whereas in 2000, 2005, 2010, if you wanted to place a bet on the Maharashtra cricket 11 playing in Pune against whoever, the Nagpur team or whoever it was, you'd be struggling to get a lot of money down. You could have still bet, you could have still gone to some chai stall, asked to speak to some fella and put down thousands of rupees. But it would have been difficult. There would have been a market, it would have been difficult to break through. What's happening now is that market, that globalized sports gambling market, has expanded around the world. And there are hundreds of billions of US dollars. That is the gambling market. And that flow of cash is suddenly going on to relatively small games. I mean, most people are betting on the India national team and the Pakistani national team, absolutely. But many others, in ways that would be unfathomable 10, 15 years ago, are now betting on these small games, on these small leagues. And that is the existential threat that is, it's almost like gasoline is being poured onto the traditional sports corruption, and it's catching wave, and it's really threatening sports around the world.
Coming to that, Declan, the bogey that's thrown out in India a lot is you're going to solve match fixing by legalizing betting in India. Right now, betting on sport or betting on anything is illegal under the gambling laws of India. How would you respond to that statement that legalize betting and you'll deal with match fixing and manipulation?
Well, one is you're always going to have some form of criminality in sport. So let's get away with that, and let's stop thinking about unicorns and rainbows and stuff, and admit that there's always going to be corruption. But let's give ourselves some tools to be able to fight that. And the first thing is, before you start talking about legalization of gambling, legalization of stuff, which is a good idea, you've got to make match fixing illegal. You've got to bring in a specific criminal law that says any attempt to fix, to manipulate a sporting event that goes on in the great country of India is illegal. Bam. Once you put that law in, then you can start to legalize the sports gambling market. And you can figure out a way that's culturally appropriate in India. It's not my job as an outsider to say, so that all the cultural groups are respected, they feel that their viewpoint on God, law, society is respected. So you have a legalized system of sports gambling. But before you try to put that in, before you take on the different demographic groups in India, first of all, let's do the easy, low-hanging fruit, and that's make match fixing illegal.
Fantastic, Declan. And just in terms of the issues at hand, how much of an organized crime problem is it? Is it just one-offs here, someone influencing a cricketer here, a football player there? How deep is the rot, and how much of a serious effort has been made to tackle this? Where do you think we are on the battle?
Let's begin with the discussion of how important sports gambling is to organized crime. And that was one of the surprising parts of my research. I've spent years, decades now, researching this. And you go and talk to, say, Donnie Brasco, the most famous, influential undercover agent the FBI had. He was inside the Bonanno crime family for years. The famous Hollywood movies and books made about him. So Joe Pistone, who's Donnie Brasco, and I have become somewhat friends. And I remember sitting over breakfast in a hotel. We were doing one of these events together. And I said, how much is sports gambling important to the mob? Is it bigger than drug dealing? And he started laughing. He said, of course it's bigger than drug dealing. It's every day. You know, when you do a big drug deal for the, banana crime family, it's one deal, it makes you an enormous amount of money, but there's stiff penalties, it's risky, half your people end up becoming drug addicts. It's just really complicated. But sports gambling is 24/7, 365 days a year. There's all kinds of profitable ways for organized crime to make money from that sports gambling world. Loan sharking that accompanies sports gambling makes millions and millions and millions of dollars for organized crime every single day. So sports gambling is enormous.
Declan, do you think that sports bodies have taken this seriously enough? Have they understood the problem? And if they have understood the problem, have they done what's needed?
In general, there have been a few honorable, decent, good exceptions, but in general, they've regarded match fixing in the same way they regarded everything else, be it, abuse, be it doping, be it problems with governance. This is something that they can talk about in the media. They can kind of, massage the message. And my essential point is that match fixing is unlike anything else. It is the end of your sport. We have seen all kinds of sports, the credibility, the sponsorships, the fans disappear. I'll give you as prima facie evidence, look at Singapore football or Malaysian football. Back in the 1970s, 1980s, and early 1990s, they were pretty good national teams in terms of FIFA ranking. They had so many match-fixing scandals, so many problems going ahead there, that their credibility was destroyed. Where stadiums used to be full of 60,000, 70,000 people, they're now lucky to get 1,000, 2,000. Their revenue has died up. They've become bush leagues, effectively. And that is what will happen to many Indian sports leagues unless you really grasp the nettle and start dealing with the modern world, the new world of globalization of the sports gambling market and its link to match fixing.
And in many ways, many of the sports bodies have perhaps sort of kept and limited information to the public of things they have been aware of. Is that a risky game to play? I mean, on the one hand, you want to retain trust, but does that also involve keeping things away from the public, the little things that have happened and perhaps have been dealt with in-house?
That's a very difficult question to address clearly. And because it's really like a meat packing plant, and my apologies to my fellow vegetarians, but it's like a meat packing plant where they're producing toxic sausages. Do you want the people to know? Well, it's going to affect your profit line. However, if you don't tell people, they may be consuming stuff and dying. It's the same thing with sports. Do you tell people honestly that there's some corruption going on because you risk them turning off your sport? But if they find out in another way, and they will eventually, your credibility is completely gone. Your governance is completely gone. So number one, make sports match fixing illegal in India. Number two, start developing ways of whistleblowing, independent agencies of whistleblowing. Number three, bring in a sports gambling monitoring company, be it Bet Genius, be it FedderBet, be it Sport Radar, who has been kind enough to sponsor your conference. There are many issues with sports gambling monitoring companies, but they're absolutely necessary. They're absolutely mandatory. And the one thing on a business side that I will say to every single sports person that's listening to this conversation is that your data is worth a lot of money. Never forget that. You can forget everything else that Declan Hill has said in terms of my business acumen, but understand that the data that your sports produces is worth millions. So really start to figure that out when you start doing this, walking into this new world.
Declan, my penultimate question. We have a lot of sports set up as private leagues and structures which are really struggling financially. How much effort must be spent on structuring the businesses of the little leagues well enough to make sure they remain immune from the challenges of corruption? Because what we've seen is this is not an athlete issue alone. When unsustainable business models are set up, there are other people in the chain who actually have the wrong incentives. So can there be concerted efforts, and should there be an industry body looking at this for more sustainable business models where the people are sort of franchisees and other people coming in are not just let out to dry and to figure out their own means of recovery?
Look, I'm a massive, as you and I have spoken, I'm a massive believer in the Cuban martial arts system. And there they have $0. It's a very poor country. And so they just use their intelligence on how to win and how to produce gold medalists. I think the same thing for all sports governance and leagues is sit down and figure out, how do you make your sport the most interesting and competitive? How do you structure your season so that there are local rivalries going on, that there are local matches, so that your league is really, really exciting? And that actually doesn't you don't have to spend very much money. You don't have to, begin a new committee or some new quango where everybody gets together and they have long, boring chats and people take minutes and things. But take the time with a single sheet of paper and a couple of senior executives in your sport and say, how are we going to make this league as exciting? How are we going to sharpen the rivalries? So the Liverpool-Manchester Uniteds, the Bombay, I always say Bombay, the Bombay-New Delhi rivalry is right there. So people are saying, this is something exciting. That is, it doesn't cost anything, but it's a fantastic way of protecting your sport from match fixing, this way of making sure that the league is always exciting. Second of all, it obviously brings in fans, and it really is the quickest and easiest way of stopping match fixing, making sure your league doesn't have all kinds of matches in it that mean nothing. So North American sport, for example, has a massive problem with what's called tanking. And that's where the professional sports teams, after a certain point in the season, start deliberately losing games because they get draft benefits for the next season. This is the kind of thing that you have in India, not the same way, but you have games which don't mean anything. You have games that, nobody cares about those things. Start to eliminate those games and make your leagues as exciting as possible. And you'll have a two-punch. You'll have one, the fans will love it, the sponsors will love it, you'll get lots of money. And two, it protects you in a very serious way from any form of match fixing.
Fantastic. Declan, what can match fixing learn from other aspects of organized crime which have been successfully dealt with, perhaps in different ways?
Number one, I get back to the low-hanging fruit. Let's not waste our time with theoretical discussions. Make match fixing illegal in the great country of India. Two, then you can start the conversation about how you can effectively make sports gambling legal with all the different demographic challenges in a great country like India, with all the different national religious groups who have differing attitudes on sports gambling. That's number one, is just make match fixing illegal, and then we can start the rest of the campaign.
Fantastic, Declan. It's been wonderful talking with you. Just a parting message for any Indian sports fan or any participant in our conference. What would you like the last thought to be for them?
Sport is a fantastic mechanism for teaching ideals, for teaching values, for teaching, passing on moral code. And it's now under an existential threat that we've never seen before. And you know, and I know that sport can be protected and it should be protected. And I beg you, brothers and sisters, it must be protected. So this conference is incredibly important. Please, please do it. Thank you very much. It's been a real honor for me.
Thank you, Declan. Thank you for joining us.